She pretended to be a victim, until everything was uncovered. At the core of the human psyche lies a labyrinth of masks, illusions, and untold stories. We are beings shaped as much by the scars we inherit as by those we choose to display. Some walk through life burdened by genuine pain, while others weave pain into a veil, a symbolic fabric that cloaks the truth with the art of dissimulation. The boundary between victim and perpetrator is, at times, a broken mirror. Shattered, it confuses the observer, distorts faces, and scrambles identities. In that distortion, she emerged, a woman with hollow eyes and weighty words who seemed to carry the unbearable burden of a cruel, irreparable past. She cried with the intensity of someone who had lost everything, trembled like those who no longer trust reality. She was convincing. She was captivating, but it was all a performance, or almost all. To understand how we arrived at her, we must revisit the concept of victimhood. Historically, the victim occupied a sacred place. In archaic times, it was the sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat bearing the community's sins so it might be reborn. René Girard, in his theory of the scapegoat, shows how societies create mechanisms of ritual violence to preserve internal cohesion. The sacrifice of one individual was, paradoxically, the foundation of social order. To be a victim, in that context, was to be chosen, an ambivalent figure, both sacred and disposable. In modern times, this symbolism has been transmuted. The victim has become a synonym for innocence, for moral purity. Those who suffer are right. Those who suffer deserve credibility. This paradigm shift opened a dangerous door, the possibility of weaponizing suffering as a currency of symbolic power. Our protagonist, let's call her Lena, saw this with the clarity of a strategist. It wasn't sudden. It was a process, a psychic alchemy that mixed real traumas with unspoken desires. Lena didn't start by lying. At first, she was, in fact, wounded. But somewhere along the way, pain became language, and language, power. She discovered that tears could open doors that merit could not, that a well-told story, punctuated by strategic silences, could capture empathy faster than any resume. The world, after all, is starving for stories of overcoming. It is our new form of mythology. And Lena could craft myths with mastery. It wasn't just about deception. There was a deeper drive, the need to be seen, to exist in the eyes of others as something unforgettable. Jacques Lacan warned us, the subject exists only insofar as it is recognized. Lena built her identity at the intersection of trauma and spectacle. She didn't fake suffering. She performed a suffering so believable that, in the end, she herself no longer knew where the act ended and reality began. This phenomenon, known in psychology as symbiotic mythomania, reveals the individual's capacity to internalize their own fiction until it becomes indistinguishable from their autobiography. But the real world has harder layers than the stages of the psyche. When Lena entered the institutional protection circuit, when she began receiving aid, when she was embraced by support networks, her narrative gained traction. There was something theatrical in her testimonies, in the selective memory lapses, in the emotional breakdowns that always occurred when doubt loomed. Institutions, trained for empathy, rarely question victims. And why should they? Doubt, in that context, is a form of secondary violence. But gradually, small cracks appeared. A contradictory detail here, a date inconsistency there, people who claimed to know her in different versions of the story. That was when an investigative journalist, driven by a nagging intuition, decided to dig deeper. Not out of cruelty, but out of a commitment to the truth. The investigation revealed that many of the episodes Lena narrated were collages, excerpts from books, accounts from others, scenes from documentaries. She had constructed a mosaic of traumas that were not hers. What makes it even more disturbing is that Lena wasn't a classic villain. She didn't steal money, didn't commit direct crimes. Her fraud was symbolic. she used the pain of others as raw material to forge her place in the world. And in doing so, she became a figure hard to hate, because, to some extent, we all do this. The digital age has accelerated this phenomenon. We live in a culture where exposure is synonymous with existence. Suffering has become content. Social media is flooded with outbursts, videos of emotional breakdowns, testimonies that blend confession with performance. The boundary between truth and acting has become liquid, as Zygmunt Bauman would say. And in this scenario, Lena's case is not an anomaly. It is a mirror, an uncomfortable lens on our desires for belonging, validation, and narrative control. The most unsettling part is realizing that, in some way, Lena was a victim of a world that rewards those who suffer most, of a culture that eroticizes trauma and turns personal pain into social capital. A victim of herself, of a fragile narcissism that constantly needed reaffirmation. The lie, in this context, was a desperate cry for recognition, a plea for love. When confronted, Lena cried as never before, not out of shame, but out of loss. She knew that, in losing her mask, she would also lose attention, affection, centrality. It was as if her existence dissolved with the exposed lie. Nietzsche said, "We need lies to live." The naked truth is unbearable, and perhaps Lena embodied this thesis more intensely than any philosopher could have predicted. Her story is not just about fraud. It's about the nature of identity in liquid times, about how we build our personas atop ruins, and how ruins, at times, are truer than the structures we erect afterward. The scandal surrounding her forces us to rethink what we consider real, because deep down, reality is also a shared narrative, a collective illusion sustained by fragile consensus. When she finally fell, Lena didn't try to justify herself. She remained silent, staring into the void like someone watching an abyss open beneath their feet. Perhaps she understood at that moment that the greatest lie she told was to herself. And that is a kind of pain no audience can applaud.